Chapter 5 Yellow Cat. Macree's farmstead was outside of town. Their pecan trees in rows were running down the length of their 3-acre property, their house more slumped than standing properly. Their wooden house was made of upright planks, time-worn and gray and pitched by cedar shakes. The squeaky stairs that climbed the railless porch were bowed by warping rain and stained by scorch. Most of their house enjoyed relieving shade that a sprawling shagbark hickory gave. Her gracious shadows bathed a barn with stalls, where bays were made by 4 partitioned walls. The leftmost bay garaged their box-bed wagon. Its canvas top was sun-creased, dulled, and sagging. The rightmost stall held bundled bales of hay for 2 old mules that staffed the middle bay. Clancy's shirt, once white, now tarnished tan, was soaked with blood and dripping off his hand that pressed the shirt against his gushing chin. His moans were trembled like a violin. On Tommy's shoulders their overalls hung, and as they strode the loose suspenders swung. The boys rehearsed the story they devised. When facing mothers, lies seemed justified. His mother, Rose Macree, abandoned chores when they approached her wearing just their drawers. His wound throbbed more with every step he took, yet far less painful than his mother's look. Her graying auburn hair was a braided crown with wayward wisps, and sweat cascading down her sun-pinked face, where wrinkled lips were thin, like threadbare seams exposed upon her skin. Since Clancy figured he was due a drubbing, the instrument expected for the clubbing would likely be his mother's wooden spoon. She'd wield it like a lawman at high noon. Although her furnace grew to blazing hot, and punishment consumed her every thought, to see her child's blood subdued the fires, still wary, knowing boys are natural liars. "Clarence Macree!" Miss Rose said irritated, so Clancy birthed the story they created. "Mama, we was comin' home, but then old Blaine and them done catched us at the bend. They circled us, and they was wantin' trouble. We told 'em straight, we don't want no scuffle, but with no cause at all they started in. Got Tommy on the cheek, me on the chin." While searching for the truth within their eyes, she used her questions to uncover lies. "Then why y'all be soaking wet and naked?" "They must have thought that we was dead, we reckoned." Clancy was relieved at Tom's reply, which made the story easier to buy. But Rose kept still and silent, wisely waiting to see if they'd bring rope for their own hanging. Clancy said, "We heard 'em start to run, but then, to cover up what them had done, they throwed us in the river like 2 logs and left us for a couple of dead dogs." Appealing to her sensibility, Clancy moaned with credibility. She led the nervous boys toward the house and barn, while gently pulling strings upon the yarn. "If in the river y'all was thrown, then why's your overalls as dry as a bone?" Their honest cheeks turned liars burgundy. When stumped, a moment is eternity. They dodged an explanation as they walked, and parted a red sea of chicken flock. Their clucks were disapproval of being roused from pecking fodder strewn around the house. Their cranky porch steps also voiced displeasure, grumbling at the interrupted leisure. Inside the house she said, "Let's have a peek." To sit in soggy drawers near made him shriek. She peeled the shirt from off his drying wound as her interrogation was resumed. While stitching, Rose inquired, "Where's Terence at?" So Thomas said, "He runned, that yellow cat." Tom's quick response helped Clancy realize in truth's embrace the finest fiction lies. Miss Rose remarked, That ain't the boy we know. Ain't he the one who's first to throw the blow? Thomas searched for this lost piece of plot. As moments passed, the more he felt more caught, and Clancy couldn't speak to lend him aid. His mom was weaving stitches like a braid. But Daniel Boone could not sit idly by and watch the helpless Davy Crockett die. Before his mouth could open up to pour, his pounding heart became the knocking door. "Miss Rose! Miss Rose!" A woman's voice was heard. Their hearts were seized as if their blood was curd. It was the Maury's mother's voice, Miss B, who had that yellow cat in company. The beautiful lie the two frontiersmen built now seemed to teeter on a wobbly stilt. They thought their tale would now come crashing down and shatter like an egg dropped on the ground. Miss B was one to over-dramatize with wild, expressive arms and breathy cries. And she began. "My child with angel's wings, come now, sweet Terence told me everything." Before Thomas could blink, she had him trapped in her embracing arms that had him strapped to this robust, convulsing, weeping woman. His puzzled face was squished against her bosom. Both Tom and Clancy's bulging eyes were fixed upon the yellow cat within their midst. But Terence wasn't casting a snarling sneer. Instead, he signaled, tugging on his ear. The boys had instituted long ago this secret gesture, letting them all know one of the country boys had spun a tale, and to keep mum, just simply follow its trail. This earlobe tugging proved to come in handy, and Terence must have conjured up a dandy, a lie so pure, without a hint of stink, that made him punctuate it with a wink. As if her Tommy came back from the dead, Miss B with love was cradling his head. "Thank you for undoing evil ploys, and by your mercy, Lord, you saved our boys." Miss B, relinquishing her crushing clutch, brushed her thumb to stroke a tender touch that moved across his puffy cheekbone, where swollen reds bled into bluish tones. "How could those boys harm such a precious face? Someone ought put Blaine right in his place." Miss Rose no longer stitched. "Go on, Miss B. I reckon they had spun a yarn on me, and figured that I had two cornered mice. Them two was just about to pay the price for lying. Them mice was just about to feel," she grabbed her wooden spoon, "my stomping heel." So B retold the tale with fine improvements, as if on stage with spotlight captured movements, and she performed her lines with actor's flair, combining monologue with showy prayer. "That awful Blaine McShay and rowdy gang, they hid theyselves, then out the trees they sprang. Those heathens jumped our babies something vicious, an act premeditated and malicious, and no good Christian woman shall restate the wicked words they said from hearts of hate. Oh Lord, I beg you, please to help me find forgiveness for these deeds unjust, unkind. Poor Thomas and your Clancy got they licks, but slyly Terence wiggled out they fix, and then into the trees my Terence fled, as those barbaric boys took ours for dead. But nothing escapes the Lord beneath the sun. Make no mistake, he'd seen what Cain had done. Miss Rose, you can't believe what they done next. One savage said, 'Good riddance to you next.'" With love and guilt, Rose looked in Clancy's eyes. His woeful face begged her to sympathize. A most effective scheme he'd oft employ, since Cain, in fact, a craft of every boy. This scene induced no pausing in Miss B, who thus continued her soliloquy. Those nasty vermin drug our children down and made it look like they had swum and drowned. Took off their clothes and even hung 'em nice. And then without remorse or thinking twice, they threw our children in the river, Rose. She paused to handkerchief her eyes and nose. Terence had been waiting for his cue to pull the yarn with needle threading through. His mother's dabbing lent the perfect time for Terence to deliver his punchline. He said, I never ever run so hard. I had to race the river yard for yard to get myself upstream to fetch 'em out, the whole time praying 'cause of dread and doubt. I grabbed the longest branch that I could find, no time for giving safety any mind, and I went in the water after 'em, reaching out that branch to gather 'em. They fought the current hard with all they might. He paused. Miss Rose, they eyes was full of fright. But when they grabbed that branch and took a hold, I fetched 'em out and drug 'em from the cold. They hugged me, ma'am, was saying I's a hero. But to that fuss I waved my hand. No, I just praised the Lord and hurried home. But Thomas wouldn't leave his friend alone. They walked one way and I went on the other. So thankful for our understanding mothers. A teary smile accompanied Miss B, who listened on in quiet ecstasy. Within the fabric of what Terence weaved were all the things she wanted to believe. And Terence shined with false humility beneath the light of B's tranquility. The two frontiersmen opted to allow the engine to have his moment's glory now. These mice were freed, but never figured that it would be by the tail of a yellow cat.